since we've been covering some controversies on this live stream, I'm just going to keep going with the controversy train. We're going to talk about the Joe Rogan controversy over at Spotify, because why not? Like we've touched on all the hot topics. In fact, we should probably talk about a certain actor shooting someone on set, just to tempt the YouTube gods. Why not? Anyway, so we've got this ongoing kind of thing with Spotify and Joe Rogan, where basically these musicians are coming out against Joe Rogan, spreading misinformation on his podcast, and they're pulling their stuff off of Spotify. And when this happened, Spotify's stock kind of like took a dive, and everyone was pointing to, oh, Joe Rogan is killing Spotify's stock. But what I found interesting was that, first of all, the Spotify stock downtrend kind of correlated with all the other stocks dumping because, of the economy and inflation and stuff like that. And this just came out via the Hollywood Reporter that Spotify is actually killing it right now in terms of like its subscribers and its revenue. So Spotify hit 180 million paying subscribers in the middle of, the Joe Rogan protest. And if we kind of go through some of the stuff here.
Hold on. They lost all the Neil Young listeners, though. I don't understand.
They did.
How is that even possible?
So they have 180 million paid subscribers, 406 million monthly active users by the end of 2021. Their revenue has grown to around $445 million, which is up about 40% year over year. Their total revenue for last year hit $3 billion. And I didn't know this, but Spotify is apparently a European company. I believe it's based in Stockholm. And they're not even kind of beholden to, the laws. And in fact, if we look at the amount of money that, or the amount of paying subscribers, so Europe accounts for 40% of Spotify's paying subscribers, while North America is only 29%. So, all these US artists who are coming out and pulling their stuff off Spotify, it's almost like it doesn't matter because the Europeans have like completely different taste in music and stuff like that. But one of the things I found interesting is that in response to the Joe Rogan controversy, Spotify came out and said, hey, we're going to be putting labels on our content now. So like, we're just going to tell people it's like, hey, some of this could be misinformation, take it with a grain of salt. But in this other article that I found on the Hollywood Reporter, which is basically about the larger rift over the rules of the streaming services, they interviewed this guy who's kind of like the head of the Union of Musicians and Allied Workers. And he basically said that it's very difficult for musicians to pull their music as individuals from a streaming platform because it's not just the income from streaming, which is way less than it should be, but it's also to show bookers or festival bookers or record labels who might be signing you. They look at your Spotify numbers as a sort of determination of what you will and will not get. So in addition to, music streaming revenue, your popularity on Spotify helps you book live gigs and stuff like that, which contributes to your revenue. And so a lot of people are saying that the reason that there's not more people pulling their stuff from Spotify is because they simply can't afford to, like they're too dependent on the service. So one of the interesting things about this, to me at least, is that, is there a bigger movement within the artistic community against Joe Rogan and, his willingness to talk to people who have differing views from the overall narrative? Or is this just an AstroTurf way of targeting Joe Rogan because he's seen as a threat by the mainstream media, challenging their monopoly on this? So, Mr. Reagan, I'd like to go to you first for this. What do you think about this whole controversy?
Yeah, it's a silly controversy. Look, this is how artists think about this stuff. Unless they're, I don't know, super activists. Most artists think, okay, what is the benefit? What is the reward I can get for this, and what's the cost? Right? Excuse me. There's probably something close to zero cost for Neil Young to pull this stunt, because who was listening to Neil Young?
Well, he lost like 40% of his streaming revenue, right? or his
Yeah,
overall
which
revenue
I
from
think was, I
streaming.
think, something like $6 a week. Like, I think he's fine. Like, what probably happened was that a lot of people who like Neil Young or like the position that he took are now trying to listen to him more on other services or buying his albums or something like that. Okay, fine. Good for you, Neil Young. You made a bit of a splash.
Well,
You
Crosby,
know,
Stills, and Nash are pulling their music, and Bruce Springsteen's a guitarist is like, take anything I have off there too.
okay,
Yeah,
well
and you
those
know
guys
where they're
are
now
those.
getting the bulk of their streaming revenue, since they're no longer on Spotify, from noted good corporate citizen Amazon Music.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what a bold and daring stance to push consumers towards Amazon.
Yeah, I think the secondary and tertiary people who are doing this are probably not going to get the same impact as Neil Young, but I do think that this is a cost benefit assessment by these people. Like, if I take this stand, will I look good? Will I make more money? Will I be more popular? Because these
will
are all
I be mentioned in the media for the first time in years?
Exactly right.
When was the last time someone brought up Joni Mitchell? Right, other than to Google, is Joni Mitchell still alive? Well, now we all know. So her publicist probably said, like, look, Joni, I looked at the numbers. You're making a couple of bucks a week, but you can't put a dollar value on the free publicity you will get if you come out and take the firm stand that you're not going to let the 6 people who listen to your songs on Spotify do it anymore.
But
that's
exactly.
not fair to Joni Mitchell. I'm sure more than 6 people.
Well, no, but I mean, you're talking about artists in general, really. I mean, you're not talking specifically about her. And you're right. I mean, these these artists are getting more out of it than they're losing, probably, which is why they're doing it. And fair enough. But again, this is just like the Whoopi Goldberg thing. It's just like all this stuff, or Gina Carano. It's a fake scandal. I mean, Joe Rogan is just the guy that CNN should be. He's the guy that's interviewing people that should be in the news that aren't. And look, I would say this:
sit down and talk to both sides, right?
Yeah. If you were a leftist, I wouldn't say, "Oh, we got to cancel Joe Rogan." I would say, "Let's jump on that bandwagon. Let's utilize his popularity and say, okay, let's get Fauci on there with the other guy that I forget what's that guy's name, Dr. Malone."
Yeah.
We'll get Fauci and Dr. Malone in it, and they'll do like a little bit of like we'll get them to do a little dog fight. We'll see who wins. The problem is we all know who's going to win, right? And they can't do that. They can't have a fair debate, because then Dr. Malone's going to mop the floor with Fauci. Fauci's going to look like a fool. They don't want their idol, Dr. Fauci, to look like a fool. And so instead, the only option they have is to pretend that Joe Rogan has somehow promoted some kind of like misinformation or something like that. Look, the other day, YouTube tried to censor me for, well, what they censored me for? I said something like I wasn't sure that the 2020 election was perfect, right? And I said this. I was reading a conversation I had with
Joe Biden agrees with you, right?
I'm sorry?
Joe Biden agrees with that, right?
I think, yeah, he might. Well, so I was reading a conversation I had with my cousin. I was just reading the conversation, and in the conversation, I told my cousin what I thought. This is my personal view. And YouTube's pulled me off YouTube for a week. They canceled my channel for a week and said, you're spreading misinformation, or you're promoting misinformation or something like that. And the wording is very specific with YouTube, and it's like I'm trying to promote this idea. But in that video, I wasn't promoting anything. I was just reading an opinion that I had, a personal opinion that I had. So, I mean, these social media companies are crazy. Not only can you not promote an idea that may well be true, you can't even have that opinion and express it, because, like, what if I wore a shirt that had a Nike emblem on it? Am I promoting Nike because I'm wearing that shirt? Like, I think there's passive promotion and there's active promotion. And there's this idea, but honestly, you should be able to promote. You should be able to say anything. You should be able to say anything you want. Okay, all of this whole misinformation thing. We should not have the social media companies directing the information that everyone gets. Right? People should be able to. The idea that they have to put these warnings on Spotify, like, oh, if you're listening to this podcast, not every bit of information in it is true. Okay, listen, let's just do that here, guys. This is the moment for all eternity. Not everything you hear in life, folks, is true. All right? Occasionally people say things that are wrong, are incorrect. People lie to you. People are mistaken about things. People in authority are mistaken about things. Scientists sometimes. People on the flippin' news are sometimes wrong. Even the president is occasionally wrong. Okay, guys? Shocking, I know. So just use your best
It would be nice if
Sense.
it would be nice if the social media platforms were a free market of ideas as opposed to like a centralized control
Yes.
censorship mechanism. But
Yes.
look, I wanted to point out to you that so Spotify's podcast library actually grew from 3.2 million to 3.6 million
I noted that.
at the end of 2021, and their ad revenue off of podcasts reached $375 million. But in response to the Joe Rogan controversy, we have two big podcasters. I use big loosely on Spotify who are like, I'm not releasing any more episodes until Joe Rogan's pulled off. And these are people who, are exclusive to Spotify, but they're not getting like $200
I didn't hear
million.
this. Who is this?
Okay, so the first is Brene Brown, who has an exclusive deal with Spotify for her podcast called Unlocking Us and her other podcast, Dare to Lead. And then we have Roxane Gay, who hosts the Roxane Gay Agenda. Both of them are threatening to pull their shows in response to the Joe Rogan controversy. Chris, do you think Spotify actually cares about this type of thing, or are they just going along for PR reasons?
No, I don't think they care at all. And I think they're only going along reluctantly, and they'll probably draw a line in the sand relatively quickly, because the one thing you can't do is give in to a bully, right? Once you let the mob in the door, it's over. But if you just dig in and say, listen, our attention spans have been obliterated, our brains have been ruined by the internet, and I dare you to stay angry at this over a prolonged period of time, you win. It's a very, very simple formula. Like, if you're in modern PR, that's the only strategy you need to know. Dare anyone to stay angry or to pay attention for more than 72 hours. Just dig in. That's all you got to do.
Have you guys read The Art of the Deal? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Trump's Art of the Deal?
I have not.
He makes a pretty big deal in that book about negative publicity and how good it is.
Right.
And how, if somebody's attacking you in the media, you're in the media. So every time they go after Spotify and make a big deal, they're marketing Spotify.
Well, it's also interesting that Spotify is a Swedish company and they're known for their neutrality, right? So,
right.
No, that's Switzerland.
Right.
That's Switzerland. You're getting.
So, I thought you were making a Bush joke there.
I'm Jeb. Please clap.
Oh yeah, W apparently actually did that in a run up to the Iraq War. He confused Switzerland and Sweden, and I want to make a point actually about George W. Bush here in a moment. The reason why I think Joe Rogan is a flashpoint here, other than the fact that he's just prominent and successful, is that, as we discussed last week, Matt, his format is an incredible threat to the traditional media model, the one that we talked about as being arson, right?
It wouldn't be if they would do their job.
Yeah, the soundbite model versus the long form, uncut, unedited model.
He circumvents the traditional delivery mechanisms, and he gives people something that they can't get from cable news. And what's more, in so doing, he is feeding into a trend that is pushing back against the iron yoke of the two-party calcified structure that cable news kind of exists to feed into. Its business model is dependent on pitting people, American people, against one another and making you hate your neighbor. And so, one of the things that I have found as a frequent listener to Rogan is that he speaks to the growing number of politically dispossessed people in this country who don't feel at home in either one of the two political parties. And that's why I think he is a target for so much animus right now, because a lot of people are consciously attempting to limit his influence. And then there are a lot of other folks who I guess I could uncharitably describe as useful idiots who don't understand that they're being manipulated, but they're just basically being deployed as foot soldiers to support the agenda of their chosen sports team.
Can I disagree with you just a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead.
I would say that conservatives like Joe Rogan, and we recognize that Joe Rogan is not a conservative,
right?
But we like Joe Rogan because Joe Rogan is willing to just say what he believes, sort of unapologetically, and explore the possibility of being wrong. And it's actually really refreshing to see that. Whereas I think the reason the left hates Joe Rogan so much is because I do think that a lot of the dispossessed people who are politically dispossessed right now, as you were saying before, are from the left, because the left is shifting into this sort of Marxist craziness. And so there's a lot of sort of more moderate leftists who are like, I don't feel like I'm a Democrat anymore. What am I? And they become a kind of Joe Rogan listener, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was Jordan Peterson had the same problem. They were looking at Jordan Peterson going, this guy's dangerous, because a lot of younger liberal people were attracted to Jordan Peterson. The same thing's happening with Joe Rogan now, and people are exploring new ideas, some of which are, good Lord, conservative ideas. And I do think that I don't think that the mainstream media would be worried about Joe Rogan if conservatives were shifting more left because of him. I think they would love him. He would be celebrated. I think the reason they don't like him is because he's shifting more people from the left to the middle, even sometimes a little bit to the right. Even though I don't think Joe Rogan is really a conservative, I think that's what his show sort of incidentally does, just by looking at things objectively and truthfully as he can. The mainstream media used to make films and specials and all this kind of stuff. The news media that was as neutral as they could make it. They don't do that anymore. They're just propaganda for the left. And even Democrat voters see it, and they're seeking out alternative media. Joe Rogan is the primary guy to go to for that, I think. So I think it's a little bit more of a left shift right. Although you are right. I do believe that people on the right who feel a little bit dispossessed on the right go to Joe Rogan as well. But I think it's much, much bigger problem for the left.
I think it does happen in both directions. God, it could be a fascinating conversation just about what has happened to the political spectrum in this country and the way we think about it. We're probably still applying an incredibly outdated, like 1980s, 90s paradigm to something that just no longer fits in those buckets. But real quick, Matt, just to kind of wrap up on the whole impulse to censor, right? To weaponize your political capital, to shut off the other side's, what you perceive to be the other side's ability to get its message out. I understand a lot of people still want to stratify themselves into one side or the other. It's my sports team versus your sports team. And so a lot of this energy is on the left, the political left right now. And so to speak to those folks, because I am trying to my wish is that all Americans would step back from this sensorial impulse, that we could just decrease that. How many times did you get frustrated watching Harry Reid change some Senate rule because you knew ultimately Mitch McConnell was going to turn around and screw your side with it 10 times worse than Harry Reid screwed the Republicans, right? This is what happens. You open up Pandora's box and eventually it gets turned around on you. So think about, like, for example, the stuff that is going on with Joe Rogan, and just ask yourself, if these kind of behaviors were taking place during the Iraq War with George W. Bush and Dick Cheney in the White House, would I have felt comfortable with it? Did you love when the Dixie Chicks' careers got destroyed because they said they didn't like George W. Bush in Texas? And if the answer is at all no, or you think maybe I would be a little uncomfortable if the shoe was on the other foot, just step back, look in the mirror, and reassess the way you're thinking about the situation. That's my...
I would say in regards to the Dixie Chicks, there's a little bit of a difference there, because their fan base basically got alienated because of their stance, as opposed to like the record label coming out and canceling them and stuff like that. Basically, the Dixie Chicks told their fans to F off, and the fans were like, okay, we'll see you later. And they never came back. So like there's a little bit of a difference there.
You're right.
Yeah, there's a concerted effort to cancel people right now, whereas that's sort of organic.
But let's get away from all this stupid controversy, political stuff.